From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast, Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. And to all the folks that are on their way to FutureCon Atlanta today, have a great time. Sorry I couldn't be there. I had a last-minute travel trip, obviously, that prevented my attendance of the much-anticipated event today. So good luck to everyone speaking and attending, and I hope it's a great, successful day with Kim and her team over at FutureCon Atlanta. Now, without further ado, let's get into this morning's show because we have a lot to talk about, folks. A lot. Yesterday was obviously Patch Tuesday. We'll talk about that, but there's also a lot happening in cyber news, so we'll get into all of that. Obviously, traveling. I don't have my traditional cup of coffee, but coffee cup cheers to all of y'all. Here's a toast, and let's get the show rolling this morning with the latest as the U.S. government yesterday announced charges and sanctions against a Chinese national who was part of the group that was targeting the Sophos Firewalls for a period of about 5 years, leading to the exploitation of several zero-day vulnerabilities in order to plant backdoors and steal sensitive data from organization. The campaign, which was linked to a Chinese APT, resulted in roughly 81,000 firewall devices located around the world getting compromised. That is according to the U.S. government. On Tuesday, the DOJ announced charges against a Chinese national named Guan Tianfeng, a.k.a. G Big Mao, over the Sophos Firewall attacks and the use of zero days. The DOJ announcement specifically mentions the exploitation of a zero-day CVE 2020-12271. Investigators determined that the attacks were carried out by Guan and others working for a Chinese company named Sichuan Silence Information Technology. This is a private company that provides services to the Chinese Ministry of Public Security, as well as other organizations. In addition to the charges, the U.S. government, specifically the Treasury, on Tuesday announced sanctions against the man and Sichuan Silence and a $10 million reward, leading to the identification and location of him. He's in China. He's not leaving China. I mean, he may go to North Korea. I heard that's a wonderful vacation spot for Chinese national. They really do like going to North Korea for vacation. I heard their spas are just top-notch in Pyongyang. So anyways, he's wanted. Flexing by the DOJ, I really don't like the strategy by the DOJ. I mean, this guy is obviously, he may be a private citizen, but really no one's a private citizen in cyber. In China, they all work for the government. So let's call a spade. And let's also understand the fact that this is, just a waste of taxpayer dollars. You've identified the guy, you pull out a press conference, you kind of say, we know who you are. This is the President Obama's name and shame tactic that hasn't worked for nothing. It's been a failure since its inception. And it continues to be a failure because it's not a deterrent. It's a badge of honor for all of these folks. It's a badge of honor. And so, with that being said, it's just absolutely worthless. But nonetheless, the charges have been brought forth. Here we go. We know who's behind it. Does that help you any? Does that make your business secure? Is it going to stop the guy? Oh, no, I'm on the DOJ's most wanted list. Am I going to stop hacking? No, he's going to double and triple down. And he's going to wear it as a badge of honor. And we've elevated his status in China. And he'll likely become a higher CCP member. It's just sometimes our government's and we got more government bonehead moves coming. So, buckle up before we get into all the patches that have to come through. There's a whole bunch of this. Attackers are actively exploiting a zero-day vulnerability in Cleo's managed file transfer software to breach corporate networks and conduct data theft attacks. The flaw is found in the company's secure file transfer products, Cleo, Lexicom, VL Trader, and Harmony. And the flaw allows unrestricted file upload and downloads, and that could lead to remote code execution. The vulnerability affects versions 5.8.0, 0.21, and earlier, and is a bypass for a previously fixed flaw, that CVE 2024-50623, which Cleo addressed just a few months ago back in October. Cleo said its software is used by around 4,000 companies, including Target, Walmart, Lowe's, CVS, the Home Depot, and many, many others. These attacks are reminiscent of the Move It Transfer attack as well. So you want to make sure you get this patched up ASAP. And again, this is an active exploitation that was spotted by the Huntress security researchers, and they did publish a proof of concept with a write-up warning users to take urgent action. So you want to make sure you're on the latest version, number one, and you also want to do some forensics, and we'll put all of this stuff in our Substack so you can see it there. Moody's. So for all of y'all that kind of, you're in a security leadership position, Moody's credit ratings have a tremendous impact on a company, and a Moody's credit outlook on an organization and a country will dictate how well it will fare. Well, something very interesting in terms of the credit risk for large companies, and according to the 2025 kind of predictions, is the rise in sophistication and AI is going to lead attackers to target larger companies that have resources to pay high ransomware. And the reason why, they say in the report, is because declining revenue per victims, attackers are now seeking to wring greater returns for their attacks by demanding higher ransom. They believe they are accomplishing this by targeting larger, bigger companies that can afford higher ransom, and they expect this increased cyber risk for Moody's rated debt issuers. Cyber criminals in 2025 make it front weaker opposition from the Trump administration. That's I don't know about that. Moody's is just, Moody's has a tendency to be political. They've downgraded like Israel's credit rating since the start of the war, even though their production per capita is the same as it was pre-war. So I take that in there. To me, what's interesting about Moody's and in this aspect is the fact that they're attributing cyber attacks, and they're saying kind of bigger companies take a look at that. Something to be very, very mindful of. But again, two things can be right simultaneously. Moody's doesn't know what the heck they're talking about when it comes to Trump's administration's cybersecurity policy, because we haven't seen it yet, right? There hasn't been much of a discussion around it because they're focusing on other issues at the moment. Not to say they won't focus on cyber. I've been told by many people close to the administration that cyber is they have a different approach to cyber than previous administrations. We'll see how that will pan out. But on the other hand, the idea that attackers are going to use generative AI to to turbocharge their attacks on larger organizations and increase their demands is also likely to be true. A BedRAM, a $10 security flaw in AMD, would allow an attacker to access cloud computing secrets, according to researchers that unveiled a new way to bypass the key security protection used in AMD chips that could allow attackers with physical access to cloud computing environments to snoop on those service clients. Again, they named it BedRAM. It's a $10 hack that erodes trust in the cloud, but you got to have physical access, meaning you actually have to be in the data center. And at that point, like I say, the probability of that happening, almost zero. Now, AMD's already issued a firmware for the vulnerability, so essentially once that's patched up, this whole thing becomes moot. But nonetheless, I saw people talk about this, and I'm like, this is a very, very high complexity type of attack that you talk to your cloud provider about, and you kind of move on. Cyber criminals, for their end, also have some issues in managing their cloud environments. According to cybersecurity researchers Noam Morotem and Ron Lokar of the loosely organized research group Cyber Labs, uncovered the operation back in August and reported it to VPN Mentor, which published a blog post on Monday about the findings, where apparently threat actors that were behind the Ticketmaster hack, so Shiny Hunters and Nemesis, left their S3 bucket open to the internet. So, they make the same mistakes we do. And as we continue, before we get into all the patches that you have to worry about this December before you head out on winter break, Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon on Tuesday revealed legislation, listen to this, that would require the FCC to set standards for telecom companies. Now, this is another classified briefing. He's kind of like jumping out to write it. But here's the thing. The bill that he's promoting would require the FCC to implement security requirements for telecom carriers that were originally included in a 1994 federal law, but never fully acted upon. So the law he's trying to pass in 2024, 30 years later, of a law that passed 30 years ago that would have required the FCC to implement those security requirements in telecom carriers. So what he's essentially saying is, hey, FCC, you know that law we passed 30 years ago? You should really get to going on it. This is what Congress spends its time on. This is what our elected officials do. This is how dysfunctional government is. And when you wonder why our foreign adversaries, I'm surprised we're where we are, honestly, because he's passing a bill to tell a federal agency to do the thing in a bill from 30 years ago. Sorry for this, but looking at this over the morning, it just shows you the amount of dysfunction that exists within the federal government and these federal agencies. And whenever I hear people in cyber always say like, yeah, but we're waiting for government to lead the way. Government cannot lead the way. The way to lead cybersecurity is private business coming together and saying, we are going to establish a standard. This is our standard. And if the standard works and it has common sense and it adds cybersecurity resilience and defense and it meets the burden of which it creates a higher cost of attack and a more sophisticated type of attack in order to take advantage of it, then the government will naturally adapt it. The people that we elect, the 435 members of Congress, and then the additional 100 senators that sit in Washington, D.C., are practically useless. Not all of them, but a good 99% of them are. Maybe there's 1% here and there that are the exception to the rule. The other ones are just career politicians that have no clue what they're doing. They pass laws that then are never enforced, and Congress holds the power of the purse, meaning if you pass a law and the agency isn't enforcing it, then cut off their funding. But they won't do that. They'll just pass it off to another agency, which is why cybersecurity is so disheveled at the federal level, where TSA is responsible for pipeline security. TSA is responsible for pipeline, train, and aviation cybersecurity. As someone who travels a lot, that's the most uneasy thing I could ever tell you. Uneasy. Why isn't CISO doing it? Why isn't CISO doing it? And again, that's my rant. All right. The rant comes with a cough. Let's go ahead and get into Patch Tuesday. But before we do that, jamescesar.substack.com. You can find all of the latest, including a daily audio podcast. This podcast that you're watching right now is available in audio format as well as the written format there. Let's get into Patch Tuesday with Microsoft fixing 71 flaws, including one actively exploited zero-day vulnerability. The number of bugs in each category for them is 27 elevation of privilege vulnerabilities, 30 RCE vulnerabilities, 7 information disclosure, 5 denial of service, and 1 spoofing. The zero-day is CVE 2024-49138, which is a Windows common log file system driver elevation of privilege vulnerability, and that needs to be patched up ASAP. Adobe, for their end, patched 160 different vulnerabilities across 16 different products. Roughly 90 other vulnerabilities were patched in their Adobe Experience Manager. A majority are medium severity, medium based on the CVSS scale, and some would allow for arbitrary code execution. Some of the flaws could be exploited to bypass security features. The only critical severity vulnerability within the Adobe is CVE 2024-43711. Adobe patched 22 vulnerabilities in Connect, as well as Animate. 9 vulnerabilities, including an arbitrary code execution bugs, were patched in InDesign, and the same number of flaws were fixed in the Substance 3D model Painter, and then only 6 in Acrobat and Reader, which are primarily used in most organizations across more users than anything else. They also patched a single vulnerability in FrameMaker, Premiere Pro, Bridge, Photoshop, PDFL, SDK, and After Effects. All could lead to code execution. So you want to make sure you get that addressed. SAP, for their end, marked a hot news, the highest severity in SAP's notebook. This new security note addresses 3 different vulnerabilities in the NetWeaver's AS for Java, which is also the Adobe document service. Again, kind of see the connection there. The critical issue, CVE 2024-47578, has a CVSS score of 9.1, and it affects the Adobe document service component of NetWeaver, which would allow an attacker with administrative privileges to send a crafted request from a vulnerable web application. Again, they're going to have admin privileges in order to do this. So this is a medium complexity type of attack. So if you're an SAP shop, is this something you got to do right off the bat? Yes, but is it something that you could potentially mitigate until you can get it through your change management process and kind of make sure you're scheduling it out? Absolutely. You just have to audit your admin privileges of all of your users throughout the process until you're able to patch it up, because again, an attacker would need to have admin privileges in order to do that. So that's just something to keep in mind there. If you still, for whatever godforsaken reason, enjoy punishment and use Avanti, they're patching 11 different vulnerabilities in their products, including 5 critical severity bugs in cloud service applications, Connect Secure, and Policy Secure. The most severe is CVE 2024-11639er. That's got a CVSS score of a perfect 10, and it's an authentication bypass that affects the cloud services application secure communication solution. The admin web console is also found vulnerable to a command injection bug. That's CVE 2024-11772. That's got a CVSS score of 9.1, and an SQL injection defect it's CVE 2024-11773, and that's got a 9.1 CVSS. So for all of those, you want to make sure you get your Avanti stuff patched up. On the ICS side, Schneider Electric published 3 new advisories this Patch Tuesday. One describes a critical flaw in the Modicon controllers that would allow an unauthenticated attacker to cause disruption to operation. This one is a low complexity type of attack, but high implications. Again, because of the separation between IT and OT, if your Modicon controllers have any sort of IT interaction that's open to the internet with any open port, you want to make sure to address this right off the bat. If you don't, then this is something that can wait for a scheduled kind of downtime outage patching type of idea, especially if it's behind an OT environment. And then you've got your IDP, IPS, and you've got your firewalls, and you may be also doing some network obfuscation on your OT network. That would also really, really help there as well. Another advisory describes high severity issues in Harmony and Proface HMI products. Those could cause complete control of the device when an authenticated user installs malicious code into an HDMI product. Again, high complexity types of attacks, rare, but a motivated attacker could do those. Siemens, for their end, published 10 new advisories. The most serious is an SCRF issue in the RuggedCom ROX2 devices that would allow an attacker to conduct actions on behalf of unauthenticated users by tricking the target into clicking on a malicious link. Again, a type of phishing attack to get to that. And again, these types of products typically sit in kind of segregated networks. And if you're putting them online, that's when you could see this happening. Otherwise, you do have a little bit of time to patch these up as well. So a whole slew there from Siemens. And Rockwell Automation published an advisory to inform customers about 4 vulnerabilities in their Arena event simulation and automation software. These are high severity ratings that could be exploited for arbitrary code execution using a specially crafted file. CISA published 7 advisories, 7 new ICS advisories, including some Schneider, some Rockwell. In addition, the agency did talk about Horner Automation, Seascape, and National Instruments LabVIEW products that were added there as well. And Germany-based industrial automation firm Phoenix Contact published 2 advisories informing customers about vulnerabilities in their PLC Next firmware. Those advisories described a dozen of security holes found over the past 2 years in a third-party software that they use. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Please make sure to subscribe, follow, share, like, comment below. Until then, have a great rest of your day, and most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.